Hello.
Hello, Commissioner, you hear us?
Yep.
Okay. I think you're loud enough there. Talk. Say 1, 2, 3 once.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. Wow, that's impressive. Okay. I'm gonna keep you on here. You can mute now, and you're good to go.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
On my alarm, and the alarm didn't get me, so they called you. Called me, they were just a low battery in the kitchen.
I'm going to start. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. As always, I ask people to turn their electronic devices on silent and whatnot. Greatly appreciated. With us today are Michael Smith, representing Russ Redding, Secretary of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, the State Treasurer, and Sue Layton, representing Revenue Secretary Dan Hassel. Thank you all for coming and being here. Commissioner Logan is on the phone and will be participating from Pittsburgh area. Good morning, Sean. Are you there?
Good morning, Chairman. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. A quorum of the board being present, I call these proceedings to order. First order, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin our formal proceedings today, we have several presentations of service awards for key Gaming Control Board employees. Kevin?
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. With the assistance of Joe Bott from our Office of Human Resources, we are continuing the tradition this morning to recognize employees who have attained that very significant milestone of 10 years of employment with the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. needless to say, we appreciate and depend upon employees with competence in their job and with loyalty. And we have a very high percentage of employees. We're only a 12-year agency. We were formed in late 2005, and it's really rewarding to be able to present periodically some of our best employees who have really contributed significantly to our success. So without further ado, I'd like our two honorees to stand up. Thank you. So our first honoree is Christopher Mendola. Chris was hired on June 2nd, 2008 as a casino compliance representative within the Bureau of Casino Compliance. Chris is assigned as the CCR to Mount Airy Casino Facility. Chris does an outstanding job of accomplishing the many duties of a casino compliance representative. Chris, thank you very much. Congratulations. We appreciate your work. So our next honoree is Geraldine Long. Jerry was hired on July 21st, 2008 as a forensic accountant within the Financial Investigations Unit of the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Jerry continues to support BIE as a forensic accountant. She does an excellent job of analyzing and reporting on very complex financial transactions. Jerry, congratulations, and thank you very much for your service. Thank you.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, September 11th, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters that are going to be considered today. First order of business is a public hearing involving Sugar House HSP Gaming. We have two public hearings to address petitions for interactive gaming certificates, and first up is Sugar House. Would the petitioners please come forward? Before we begin, I'd ask that everyone who's going to speak today please state and spell your last name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. Additionally, I'd ask that any non-attorney witnesses that may be testifying today please stand and be sworn in at this time.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you have to give this morning will be the truth, but the truth and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Laura McAllister Cox. That's McAllister Cox. I am the Vice President of Regulatory Compliance and Legal Counsel for Rush Street Gaming, LLC. I have the pleasure of being here today on behalf of Sugar House Casino and Rush Street Interactive. Joining me today, to my immediate left, is Cheryl Duhan, who is the General Manager at Sugar House, and Cheryl just joined us in mid-June of this year, and this is her first appearance here in Harrisburg. We're thrilled to have her here on this petition. And then to her left is Richard Schwartz, who's the President of Rush Street Interactive. So Sugar House Casino filed its petition seeking the issuance of an interactive gaming certificate on July 16, 2018. The petition seeks approval to offer peer-to-peer interactive games, non-peer-to-peer games which simulate slot machines, and non-peer-to-peer games which simulate table games. The OEC filed its answer on August 22nd, which provided a list of conditions and indicated there are no objections to the issuance of the interactive gaming certificate. I first want to turn this over to Cheryl to introduce herself to you.
Hello, Chairman.
Hello, good morning.
Board. My name's Cheryl Duhan, D-U-H-O-N. To Ms. Laura's point, I am the General Manager at Sugar House Casino.
I just recently joined Rush Street Gaming in mid-June. I am very excited to be here, along with my other Rush Street colleagues. As some of you may not know, since I'm meeting you all today, I previously worked for Rush Street about 10 years ago. I was part of the leadership team at Riverwalk Casino in Vicksburg, Mississippi. 10 years ago, it was Rush Street's first casino opened in the U.S., so I have a long relationship with them. Yes. So even before then, I was also GM and a regional vice president of marketing at both Resorts and Bally's Casinos in Tunica. So that was my most recent job. I was particularly excited to join Rush Street as a homecoming here in Pennsylvania for two reasons. One of which is Pennsylvania jurisdiction is probably one of the most successful in the country and very wide known. Secondly, the timing of this is actually very interesting to me with the expansion of gaming, with interactive gaming, and also with sports betting upon us. We're really excited as a property to be able to be one of the first to actually do it within the state. So I talk to my team all the time about this being an exciting time. We have worked together really closely with the Rush Street Interactive team, Richard, in making sure that we integrate both the online capabilities of RSI with our land-based casino entity. We've already started the work, so it's just a matter of getting their approvals. We're anticipating a very smooth transition. Like I said, we've already been doing the work. It's just a matter of translating that to Pennsylvania gaming regulations. So I'm very nervous. Very excited to meet you all. I'm sure I will see you all again. And right now, I'll pass it over to Richard, and he'll explain Rush Street Gaming and what that means.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good morning. My name is Richard Schwartz. It's SCHWARTZ. And I'm president of Rush Street Interactive, which will be the gaming service provider for Sugar House as we provide the technology and the platform to provide the internet gaming services. I thought I would use this opportunity to present a background of our business, a few slides, just give you additional insight and visibility into our company. So I think it's on the screen, correct. So Rush Street Interactive itself was formed in 2012 as an independent company, though the ownership is from the same owners as Rush Street Gaming, Neil Bloom and Greg Carlin, who are both individuals that I believe you all are familiar with, given their activity and presence in this market as the properties of Rivers, Pittsburgh, and Sugar House here in Philadelphia. Rush Street Interactive owns and develops our own iGaming platform in-house. It's a proprietary technology system, and it covers all the different platforms you would use for internet gaming, which includes desktop computers, mobile phones, tablets, the full service range of products that a consumer would use to engage in this type of service. We operate a real money gambling business out of New Jersey. So we have experience in that market for over 2 years. And we use the same technology platform for both social gaming and real money gaming. So real money is, of course, the wagering that we're talking about here today. Social gaming is using the same technology. It's really where players have a chance to play for free games, and there's no chance to win anything of tangible value, but they play for fun as an entertainment product, and we offer that solution as well. In New Jersey, where we launched over September. Oh, I think so. This is off. There we go. We launched in September of 2016 in New Jersey using the PlaySugarHouse.com website name. And we've become one of the fastest growing sites in that market, and I'll show you a slide later that kind of gives you a little bit of visibility into that as well. Rush Street Interactive executive team, as I mentioned, the chairman and co-founder is Neil Bloom, who you're familiar with from their activity here in the States for many years. And Greg Carlin is our CEO as well. I'm the president of the company. My My involvement, prior to joining Rush Street Interactive in 2012, I was the head of the online gaming business for WMS Gaming, a slot machine provider. That now has been purchased by Scientific Games, and so I started the foundational real money business for that company back in 2000. I think it was 2007 or 8. So I've been in this industry, regulated legal markets, for my whole career since then. Our COO is Matt Stetz. He was a chief commercial officer of a company named Unibet for many years, and over in Europe, and he joined us several years ago to be our chief commercial officer. And Einar Roselet is our CTO. He's based in Europe, and he has experience also in the gaming industry for many years, and he had co-founded a technology platform that we had initially served as our foundation for our starting point for our own technology, and he joined our company to take over and be the CTO of our business once we purchased the software years ago. As I mentioned earlier, we launched our online business back in September 2016 under the name PlaySugarHouse.com. It is only an online casino product, meaning it has table games, casino games, and slot machines. At the moment, we do not offer poker in New Jersey, nor do we offer any other product in the casino category other than the primary ones I just mentioned. Recently, we did launch a sportsbook product on the Play Sugar House website in New Jersey. So that's something that we did just in the last 3 weeks. Rush Street Interactive was also active outside the U.S. There's really only one country in Latin America that has legalized and regulated online gaming in the 100% sort of legal and regulated fashion, and that's Colombia, the country of Colombia. And so we wanted to get some experience with sportsbook earlier than the U.S., and so we applied for a license and obtained a concession there earlier this year, and we launched an online sportsbook in Colombia that is, again, regulated by Juegos, which is the national regulator in Colombia. I mentioned earlier, just to show you that we came in the market in New Jersey relatively late, 3 years after the market had opened, which was a concern because you'd rather enter a market earlier. I think because it gives you some chances to acquire some of the players that are before they're loyal in other companies' programs, loyalty programs. But we came in the market 3 years late, and we've had some success where we've been able to grow our revenues consistently since we've launched, and that just shows you kind of at a high level the trajectory of growth that we've seen so far in our first couple of years of being live in New Jersey.
Can I interrupt? I have a question. Go back
Sure.
to that slide. There's no left-hand side to that, so if you put a left-hand side up with a number, and let's take it to July of 18, what would that number be?
So I'll share it here, but it's something we don't often share because it's not published information.
Well,
but
if it, then don't tell me. I mean, if it's,
I'm happy.
you want to keep that
Yeah, so
confidential.
I think we'd be happy to share it with you privately because it's not something that's published anywhere else.
Fine.
Okay, appreciate that. Understanding. In summary, a couple points we wanted to raise. One was that RSI and its owners have only operated in expressly legal and regulated markets. We purposely have stayed out of gray markets, obviously black markets, but unless there's clear direction that legislation supporting this activity being legal and clear regulations, we've made a concerted effort to only stay in markets that are 100% legal and regulated. So I think that's something that's very relevant for this presentation. Secondly, with experience, we have a familiarity with operations in Pennsylvania and the Sugar House property, as well as online in New Jersey. So we have relevant experience. Success. We've done a lot of integration, worked very collaboratively with the Sugar House team for a number of years now, and we have a social site that we've been running with them, for them, and so we have a lot of experience with this technology in this market, working with Sugar House, and I think bodes well for the fact that not only are we planning to work with them, in Pennsylvania, but we worked very closely with the team in New Jersey, even for a lot of different purposes, and some of the marketing initiatives, and some of the VIP players have had a lot of communications with the land-based team as well. So our teams have worked very well together. We are a private company with a long-term focus, so we are able to make decisions based on the long-term success and growth of the business, as opposed to any short-term pressures that otherwise might be felt by some other companies. So that's something that we've always valued within our business. Innovation, I think we're one of the only companies that has built, certainly one of the only land-based casinos in the state that have built their own technology in-house. Most companies are licensing technologies or partner with companies from other markets. And because of that, we think it gives us an opportunity to really innovate and differentiate from others in the market, because we have something that's unique and that we're able to build it ourselves. And when there's a feedback from the players through our operations team, we can deliver that information to our development organization, and we can make changes quickly to improve the user experience for our players. The leadership team that I mentioned, all have been involved in the regulated legal online gaming markets for many years, all of us over a decade. So we have a seasoned team that understands this industry and has a background in all the disciplines of online gaming, whether it's products or operations or compliance. And so I think we have a leadership team that is experienced. This is a relevant point. And lastly, I think is we're ready to go. We have our experience in New Jersey, which we feel will be very relevant and helpful for us to get off to a smooth start here in Pennsylvania. And with that, I'll open up for any questions, any additional questions, or any comments from anybody.
Questions from Enforcement Council?
Good morning, Sarah Colasar, Kolesar, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not have any questions in this matter and does not have a presentation. However, we would request permission to make a statement and recommendation prior to opening the matter to questions from the board and ex officio members. The Office of Enforcement Counsel, along with the Bureau of Gaming Operations, Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, Bureau of Gaming Laboratory Operations, Bureau of Licensing, Bureau of Casino Compliance, Office of Diversity, and Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling have reviewed and consulted extensively on the petition and appendices filed by Sugar House HSP Gaming LP, doing business as Sugar House Casino, to conduct interactive gaming and for the issuance of an interactive gaming certificate. After which, OEC filed an answer in this matter requesting that the board order the implementation of certain listed conditions if it was so inclined to grant the relief requested in the petition. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the approval of Sugar House Casino's petition to conduct interactive gaming and to the issuance of an interactive gaming certificate to Sugar House Casino, subject to the proposed conditions outlined in OEC's answer filed on August 22, 2018, and any additional conditions imposed by the board. The Office of Enforcement Counsel is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? I gather there's no other presentation at this time?
No.
Thank you.
I believe we have a couple procedural matters. We'd like to move the presentation into the record. And also, we have a motion for confidentiality with regard to aspects of the petition and the appendices that's pending. So we would ask that you consider and grant that motion.
Enforcement Counsel have any objection?
No objection.
In that case, I think we'll consider that moved into evidence. Thank you. This matter will be taken up and voted on later during the Office of Chief Counsel's portion of the agenda. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Petitioner is a request by Mountain View Thoroughbred Interactive. Again, I would request that anybody who's going to speak today, please spell and state your name for the court reporter prior to presentation, and if we would have all non-attorney potential witnesses stand to be sworn at this time. Thank you. You may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Adrian King from the Ballard Spar firm here on behalf of Penn National Gaming and Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association. Here, as you know, with respect to our petition for interactive gaming certificate that is pending before you. Joined here today by Alex Vizda, that's HVIZDA, who is our Director of Compliance at Mountain View, and Mr. John Worthington, who was just sworn in, that's WORTHINGTON, who's the Vice President of iGaming Operations. We will keep this brief and succinct. Alex briefly would just like to say a few words on behalf of Dan Eim, who's the general
we have him
manager.
sworn then?
Alex is an attorney, although he acts in a non-legal capacity.
I think you should be
as
sworn,
well,
please.
so.
Thank you.
So, Alex, if you'd like to say
Good
a
morning,
few.
Chairman and Commissioners. Alex Vizda, HVIZDA. Dan, I couldn't be here today. He's at company-wide meetings out west, but we wanted to thank the board staff for their work with us over the last couple months with expanded gaming. It's been a busy summer, to say the least, and it's going to be an even busier fall. And the cooperation we've had and assistance we've had is really remarkable. So we just wanted to say thank you, and then we'll turn it over for our presentation.
Thank you, Alex. I'm just going to say a few words about our first slide and then really just turn this all over to John, who is obviously our subject matter expert and who you really want to hear from. But the reason why the first slide, we just wanted to share it is so you understand the investment that Penn National through Mountain View is making in this space in Pennsylvania and quite frankly nationally. As we've explained to the staff in meetings, we have created an entire separate business unit, certainly as some of the other applicants have, which is Penn Interactive Ventures, LLC, which you see at the top of the chart underneath Penn National Gaming. And the reason that's significant is we started that unit initially with respect to social gaming, not for money, and leading into the legalization of iGaming, not just here in Pennsylvania, but across the country. What I think of note for the board is Penn Interactive Ventures, PIV as we call it, has 3 locations across the United States. In Pennsylvania, we have a separate office, separate from the Wyomissing headquarters or the casino up in Grantville in Conshohocken. And already that has more than 20 employees who are working out of the Conshohocken office. I personally like to go there because they have nice things like beanbag chairs and things that you can sit on while you're coding, I suppose. And then there are also offices in Las Vegas, and there's also a studio in San Francisco. So we are putting a lot of emphasis and effort into iGaming. And as you can see, and as John will talk about, we will be entering into contracts with IGT, and then Penn Online Entertainment, which is a subsidiary for Pennsylvania, will be then providing the iGaming services and expertise over to Mountain View as the certificate holder. So that's just a quick high-level overview of how we're structured. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and he will lead you through what we're going to be doing specifically. John?
Thanks, Adrian. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is John Worthington, WORTHINGTON. I spent the last 3 years at Penn, mainly leading the operations for our social gaming as well as our online horse racing product, Hollywood Races. I work for a gentleman named Chris Sheffield, who's unable to attend today. He's our Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Interactive. He's spent over the last 4 years at Penn leading our online initiatives and creating the business that we have today. I want to talk a little bit about our key partners. As Adrian mentioned, we're partnering with IGT for our platform. We're confident in their abilities as they've got over 1,000 digital employees serving 100 different customers in over 30 countries. They're the platform provider for one of the larger Italian online gaming operators called Lottomatica, which does over $126 million in GGR. And they're also the platform provider for several U.S. online lotteries as well as Canadian lotteries. They also serve content for most of the online casinos in New Jersey. Secondly, we're partnering with GeoComply for our geolocation services, who serves most of the online casinos in New Jersey and would expect them to do the same in Pennsylvania. And then finally, for our KYC, age, and ID verification, we're planning to use Aristotle, who also has a strong history in New Jersey across the board in fantasy sports, online casino, and horse racing. Over 5 licensed gaming suppliers in New Jersey. Just to talk a little bit about the customer experience and what we would intend for our rollout to look like, we're planning to roll out on both web, mobile, and tablet. And our main competitive advantage, we believe, is going to be around our customer experience. We want to share the experience that a customer would have when they go into one of our properties and bring that online. And we'll plan to do that through offering a variety of different slot machines from known vendors and machines that you would see on the floor. We'll plan to offer live dealer at some point in 2019, as well as offer poker at some point in 2019. We're also planning on integrating our player rewards that the players would see at the property so that we can complete that life cycle for the player and give them that better experience that they'd see on the property as well. And then also intend to provide 24/7, 365 customer support via our call center and working with our property to ensure that there's awareness of the activities that we have online. Just to talk a little bit about the account creation process, I've included our registration page on the left-hand side of the slide. Once a user enters all of their information into this registration page and submits, that information will be submitted to Aristotle, which will take care of the age and ID verification process. And then we're also planning on integrating that with our internal self-exclusion list so that players will be scrubbed against that to make sure that they're not on the list. Upon the successful registration, on the right-hand side, you'll see one of the first things that the customer is prompted to do is set limits, which they'll have the ability to do both at registration and then ongoing at any time. Here's what that page looks like if the customer were to select that when they first log in or go to it at any time. They'll have the ability to set deposit, wager, and session limits, also by any interval, such as daily, weekly, and monthly. They'll also have the option for what we call the cool-off period, which is a smaller period of time that a customer can choose not to game as well. And then we'll plan to also have some clear indication of how a customer could self-exclude if they chose to do so. In terms of board oversight, like we have at the property, the board will have 24/7 access to our back office. I've included what that infrastructure looks like on the right-hand side, but they'll have access to all of our player activity monitoring, and then we're creating a number of different reports that the board will always have access to. And then finally, just to wrap up around site and customer security, we're working with IGT and also our internal info security to ensure that organizational and technical measures are put in place across the board to protect customer data and personal data. Vulnerability scans will be done on a regular basis to make sure that all the security patches are current. We're implementing strong authentication for the regulation that allows a customer to have a second factor to authenticate themselves. And then we'll continuously monitor the system logs, and reports will be generated if any thresholds are breached. And then finally, to protect against DDoS attacks, IGT has implemented an intrusion protection system to prevent those types of attacks as well as other cyber threats.
John, just real quick, if you go back to the Hollywood.com slide, could you just briefly explain to the board that is going to be our brand and just talk about how that's directly tied into our land-based facility?
Yeah, certainly. So we've operated with HollywoodCasino.com over the past 3 years on social. We're working with our land-based team to ensure that the Hollywood brand carries over. It'll be branded as such, and we'll continue to go forward with that brand to acquire customers and also serve the existing customers that we have at the property.
With that, that's the conclusion of our formal presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Enforcement Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, TEPPER, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not have any questions in this matter and does not have a presentation. However, we would request permission to make a statement and recommendation prior to opening the matter to questions from the board and ex officio members. The Office of Enforcement Counsel, along with the Bureau of Gaming Operations, Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, Bureau of Gaming Laboratory Operations, Bureau of Licensing, Office of Diversity, and the Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling have reviewed and consulted extensively on the petition and appendices filed by Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, doing business as Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse, to conduct interactive gaming and for the issuance of an interactive gaming certificate. After which, OEC filed an answer in this matter, requesting that the board order the implementation of certain listed conditions if it was so inclined to grant the relief requested in the petition. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the approval of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC's petition to conduct interactive gaming and to the issuance of an interactive gaming certificate to Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, subject to the proposed conditions as outlined in OEC's answer, filed on August 17, 2018, any conditions imposed by the board. The Office of Enforcement Counsel is available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Abby?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. And I probably could ask this of everybody who comes before us, but one of your slides made me think about it, so you get the question. But it was your slide where you talked about setting account limits and cooling off, et cetera, that made me think about kind of setting parameters and then, more importantly, how easy it is from a customer use point of view to change those parameters if I decide at some point later that I made them too high or I want to extend my cooling off period after I've had some experience. So if you know right now how that's going to be designed, like what will I as the customer, well, I won't be a customer, what will someone as a customer see, and how easily will they be able to get to where those kinds of changes can be made?
Sure. So this is the actual page. It's in the, if you're a customer, and there's at the top right-hand corner of the slide, there's the My Account section. So a customer would simply click on that. In here, they have the option, if you see on the bottom there, to reset or update their limits, so they can do that on a regular basis.
Thank you. I guess this is just then more a statement for the record. I think something like that is very important. I'm not the most tech-savvy person, but I'm savvy enough, and I find some customers, my utility bills, for example, make it very easy to kind of navigate the page to get to those account settings places, and others make it very difficult to find. And I think for customers here, this kind of account setting across the board ought to be easy to find. So that's my comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, just procedurally,
Yes, please.
I would like to just simply move the presentation into the record. We did file, obviously, our petition. We did file a motion for confidentiality. The petition or our presentation would not be subject to the confidentiality petition as it's been disclosed publicly, and that would tie together our record.
Okay. Do you have anything further to present today?
I do not, sir.
Enforcement Counsel, anything further?
No objections to their motion.
Okay, so moved. Thank you, and we will have a vote on this matter later this morning.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the June 27th and July 18th meetings. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the June 27, 2018 and July 18, 2018 meeting minutes and transcripts.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Next, Kevin O'Toole, Executive Director.
Good morning, everyone, once again. At the public meeting of August 15th, I represented that I would present a document today that would define the process by which the board would proceed to select how qualified gaming entities can apply for available interactive gaming certificates. I would also like to repeat at this time where we stand on interactive gaming certificates.
Please.
From a total of 39 available interactive gaming certificates which could be issued, Our slot machine licensees have selected and reserved 32 of those certificates. We heard this morning from 2 of our slot machine licensees, each of which have reserved certificates for all 3 types of activity. With those 32 certificates reserved, we do have 7 certificates that remain available. Those 7 certificates consist of 3 peer-to-peer poker-type games, 2 non-peer-to-peer slot-like games, and 2 non-peer-to-peer table games. The 7 interactive gaming certificates that remain available may now be awarded to qualified gaming entities, or QGEs. A QGE is defined in the Expanded Gaming Act as a gaming entity licensed in any jurisdiction which has satisfied the requirements set forth in the Act and any other criteria established by the Board, including financial and character suitability requirements. Prior to today's meeting, the Board has been provided with a document titled Interactive Gaming Qualified Gaming Entity Licensing Process. This document provides a detailed summary of the process to be utilized by the Board for accepting applications and then selecting in a random public drawing as many qualified gaming entity applicants as are necessary to award the 7 remaining interactive gaming certificates. To summarize the process, there are 4 significant points or steps that I would like to make this morning. First, interested entities must submit a petition with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeals during a specific period of time. That period of time begins on October 15th, 2018, and ends on October 31st, 2018. The information that is required to be submitted with that petition is described in the process document. Secondly, Board staff, after the submissions are made, will review those submissions and determine which petitions satisfy the criteria to be included in the group of qualified gaming entities that are eligible to be chosen to participate in the selection process. The Board will publish on its website a list of all entities which have petitioned for consideration and have been deemed qualified by our review and will be eligible to be awarded an interactive gaming certificate. Third, once all eligible qualified gaming entities have been identified, the Board will conduct a blind random drawing on a date and a time to be announced, from which all petitioners will be eligible to be selected. And in that random drawing, when the first certificate is, or the first qualified gaming entity is selected, the type and the number of certificates sought by that selected qualified gaming entity will be eligible to be awarded to that qualified gaming entity. That process, that selection process, will be repeated until there are no certificates remaining. Finally, upon being selected in the blind random drawing, the qualified gaming entity will be required within 60 days to submit completed applications for licensure and to undergo the requisite background investigation to determine suitability for licensure by the Board. This process is described in further detail in the document titled Interactive Qualified Gaming Entity Licensing Process. If approved by the Board, this document will be posted to our website today. At this time, I request that the Board consider a motion to approve the licensing process document.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any questions or comments from the Board on this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the qualified gaming entity interactive gaming process for publication on the board's website as proposed by the executive director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Claire Yantis, Director of Administration. You're pinch hitting for Danette today, I believe. Okay.
Good morning. The Office of Human Resources has two motions for your consideration today. The first motion before you is relative to the hiring of two individuals. First, Ms. Catherine Johnson has been selected as a casino compliance representative stationed at the Meadows Casino, and Mr. Matthew Farrow has been selected as a casino compliance representative stationed at Lady Luck Casino. Both Ms. Johnson and Mr. Farrow have completed the PGCB interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and are recommended for hire by Acting Director of Casino Compliance John Santel. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to hire Ms. Johnson and Mr. Farrow as indicated.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for hire as proposed by the administrative director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The second motion seeks to adopt amendments to the PGCB classification and compensation structure. As you're aware, the current PGCB classification and compensation structure was originally adopted by the board in January of 2011 based on a comparison of data across public sector markets. The last increase to the ranges occurred in 2017 in order to stay consistent with pay ranges in other Commonwealth agencies. Effective July 1st, 2018, the Commonwealth Standard Pay Schedule, which is the primary comparator for our pay ranges, was adjusted, resulting in PGCB pay ranges being below pay ranges for comparable positions in other administrative agencies. Based on the Office of Human Resources analysis of this comparative benchmark data, we have adjusted the executive and non-union management pay ranges by 2.5% with an effective date of July 1st, 2018. This results in the PGCB pay ranges remaining competitive with and comparable to the Commonwealth's standard pay schedule. I would be happy to answer any question regarding the changes to the compensation structure.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the amendments to the PGCB classification and compensation structure as proposed by the administrative director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Chief Counsel Doug Sherman.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Today we have 4 petitions before you for consideration. 2 of the petitions were heard earlier today during the public meeting. The remaining petitions will be decided based upon the record by agreement of the parties. In each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all documents filed of record. The first 2 matters are petitions seeking approval of interactive gaming certificates. Should the board approve the petitions, I want to make it clear that the board will not be authorizing the licensee to commence the operation of interactive gaming at this time. Rather, in each case, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has outlined a number of conditions the casinos and their operators will need to fulfill prior to being given the actual authorization to commence operations. With that, the first interactive gaming petition is that of Sugar House HSP Gaming LP's petition seeking the issuance of an interactive gaming certificate and making a request for confidential treatment of certain documents filed of record. That matter was heard by the board and is ready for the board's consideration at this time.
Any questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Sugar House HSP Gaming LP's petition for an interactive gaming certificate and request for confidentiality as described by the Office of Chief Counsel and with the conditions requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next petition for issuance of a interactive gaming certificate is that of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, along with their request that certain documents of record be treated as confidential. Again, the board heard from Mountain View a short time ago, and that matter is appropriate for the board's consideration of a motion.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Associates LLC petition for interactive gaming certificate confidentiality motion as described by the Office of Chief Counsel with the conditions required by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration is Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association's petition seeking an extension of time to file its Category 4 slot machine license application for its Category 4 location, which is generally in the Lancaster-Berks County area. This matter can be decided on the documents of record as it is not contested. By background, on April 4th of this year, Mountain View won its second Category 4 slot machine license auction with a winning bid of $7,500,003, which was paid on April 6th of 2018. Pursuant to the Act, absent board approval, giving a one-time 2-month extension, Mountain View's application would be due by October 6th. Mountain View has asked the board for the 2-month extension as authorized in the Act, as for the purported reason that it's been working on identifying a specific location to place the facility and has been evaluating multiple locations. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the request, and if granted, the application for this Category 4 facility would be due December 6, 2018. The matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association LLC's petition for extension of time to file a Category 4 application as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And the final petition before the board is that of Matthew Hansel. It's his request for consideration of the board's previous denial of his gaming employee occupation permit renewal application. By way of background, in November of 2017, Mr. Hansel submitted a renewal application with regard to his employment at Sugar House Casino as a player services agent. In March of 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel recommended the denial of that renewal application based upon his noncompliance with certain tax issues, both on the federal and state level. Mr. Hansel did not respond to the recommendation of denial, and the board issued an order on June 27th of this year denying his renewal application. After receiving the order, Mr. Hansel filed a request for reconsideration. Mr. Hansel appeared at the board's August 15th meeting, and at that time was still non-compliant with IRS and Department of Revenue requirements. However, during the course of the meeting, Mr. Hansel contacted the Department of Revenue, and it was confirmed by board staff that his issues with that agency were resolved, and he is now compliant with the Department of Revenue. The matter was tabled at that time, however, because there was still an outstanding issue as to his compliance with IRS requirements. Mr. Hansel has now provided the board with documentation showing that he has filed the required 2015 IRS tax forms. But notwithstanding that fact, there's still a relatively minor issue remaining concerning a potential overpayment of a tax credit to Mr. Hansel. We have verified that Mr. Hansel is working with the IRS to come into compliance with that matter, so it looks as though it's headed in the right direction, and that's the matter that's now before you for reconsideration.
Just to clarify, Revenue has him in compliance at the moment? Thank you. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Matthew Hansel's petition for reconsideration regarding the denial of his gaming employee occupation permit application as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that he be issued a gaming employee occupation permit. I further move that Mr. Hansel must provide documentation to the Bureau of Licensing and Office of Enforcement Counsel showing full compliance with Internal Revenue Service within 6 months.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, the motion's adopted.
Okay, next presenting reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Morning. Next before the board for consideration are 5 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. These reports and recommendations, along with the complete evidentiary record, have been provided to the board in advance of today's meeting. Additionally, in each case, the person that is the subject of the report and recommendation was notified that the board would be taking their matter up today and that they had the right to come and briefly address the board before a decision was made on each report and recommendation. If any of these persons are present and wish to address the board, I'd ask them to come forward when their matter is called. The first report and recommendation before the board pertains to Shane Bozeman. In January of 2018, Mr. Bozeman applied for a gaming employee occupation permit seeking work as a security officer at the Sugar House Casino. Upon review of Mr. Bozeman's application, it was discovered that he failed to disclose that he had student loans from the United States Department of Education that were in collections. Mr. Bozeman was contacted about the non-disclosure and given several opportunities to provide the board with information as well as to amend his application. However, he failed to do so. On March 5, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice recommending the denial of his application. Mr. Bozeman thereafter requested a hearing on the issue. A hearing was scheduled for June 7, 2018. However, he failed to attend. As a result, the only evidence put into the record was that by the Office of Enforcement Counsel, which I just described. This led to a recommendation of the hearing officer that Mr. Bozeman's application be denied.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the denial of Shane Bozeman's gaming employee occupation permit application as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, the motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board pertains to Elin Cohen's request to be removed from the board's involuntary exclusion list. On February 25, 2015, the board placed Mr. Cohen on the exclusion list after he was caught capping wagers while gaming at Sands Casino. Upon being confronted, Mr. Cohen, made full restitution to Sands. He was criminally charged and permanently evicted from Sands at that point in time. In March of 2018, approximately 3 years later, Mr. Cohen sent a request to the board expressing remorse for his actions and seeking removal from the list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer objecting to Mr. Cohen's request. As a result of OEC's objection, a hearing was scheduled for June 21, 2018. Both OEC and Mr. Cohen attended that hearing. Mr. Cohen appeared and testified on his own behalf, stating that he had completed an ARD program relative to the criminal charges, and that he realized his mistake and he'd like to get back, be able to go back to the casino for entertainment purposes with his wife. After hearing that testimony of both Mr. Cohen and OEC, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that Mr. Cohen remain on the list and that the board's regulations require that a person that is placed on the board's exclusion list wait at least 5 years until requesting removal from the list, absent extraordinary circumstances, and in this case it's only been 3 years.
Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding Elin Cohen's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, the motion's adopted.
The next matter pertains to a request for removal from the self-exclusion list. In March of 2018, an individual with the initials LLB filed a petition for removal from the board's self-exclusion list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer objecting to the petition. A hearing in the matter was held on June 14, 2018. Both Enforcement Counsel and LLB appeared at the hearing, each offering testimony and documentary evidence. Pursuant to the findings of fact in the report and recommendation issued, on June 30, 2013, LLB entered the Hollywood Casino and met with the casino compliance representative regarding the self-exclusion list. The CCR testified that he conducted the mandatory interview with LLB and completed all the required paperwork and procedures. The CCR further testified that LLB did not appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, nor coerced into placing herself on the list. LLB at that time signed an acknowledgement form selecting lifetime self-exclusion. LLB at the hearing testified that she and her daughter had visited the Hollywood casino frequently, that she started to go through a lot of money during these visits, and it became concerning to her. Therefore, in June of 2013, while at the casino, accompanied by her daughter, she voluntarily placed herself on the lifetime self-exclusion list. She testified, however, that she has also been diagnosed and dealing with depression and bipolar disorder for approximately 20 to 30 years, and for approximately 18 months prior to her placement on the self-exclusion list, she was prescribed Abilify to help with her depression. She put into the record documentary evidence supporting both her placement or taking of that drug, as well as evidence that a side effect of the drug Abilify can cause compulsive behavior, including compulsive gambling. She indicated that she'd stopped taking the medication sometime in February of 2013, which was 4 months prior to placing herself on the list. However, she basically, at the end of the day, testified, however, that she felt the compulsive behavior stemmed from her use of Abilify, which she no longer takes. The report and recommendation issued by the hearing officer subsequent to hearing all the testimony found that while taking Abilify may have caused LLB's compulsive behavior, it really did not affect her conscious decision to place herself on the lifetime self-exclusion list, and as a result, the recommendation of the hearing officer is that she remain on the list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding LLB's petition for removal from the voluntary self-exclusion list, and that LLB be removed from the PGCB voluntary exclusion list. I further move that the record in this proceeding be maintained under seal.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Seth Rourke's matter is the next report and recommendation before the board today. Mr. Rourke was issued a non-gaming employee registration to be employed as a beverage server at the Rivers Casino. On May 7, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Rourke's non-gaming employee registration after receiving notice that he had been charged with carrying a firearm without a license, terroristic threats, and disorderly conduct. Specifically, while working at the Rivers Casino on May 6, 2018, he stated that he was going to commit a hate crime against certain individuals because they were paying with separate credit cards. A supervisor at Rivers Casino and the Pennsylvania State Police were notified of Mr. Rourke's remarks, and he was taken for questioning to the State Police office. He admitted to making the threatening statements, but said he was joking. Upon being questioned as to whether he had any weapons on him or in his vehicle, he admitted to having a knife in his person and a handgun in his car. Upon a search of the vehicle, an additional firearm was also found. Subsequent to his arrest for having these weapons, additional knives were also found on his person. As a result of these facts, the board's executive director issued an emergency suspension of Mr. Rourke's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. A hearing in this matter was held on June 20th, 2018. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared at the hearing, offering testimony and documentary evidence. Mr. Rourke also participated pro se, but did not testify or cross-examine any witnesses. After hearing the evidence presented, the report and recommendation issued by the hearing officer recommends the suspension remain in place, and that's the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Seth Rourke's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Tyrone Smith. Mr. Smith was issued a gaming employee occupation permit in March of 2017 and was employed as a security officer at the Sugar House Casino. On June 15, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for emergency suspension after receiving notice that Mr. Smith had been charged with numerous criminal offenses stemming from the alleged attempted sexual assault of a minor. As a result of these allegations, on June 15th, the board's executive director issued an order suspending Mr. Smith's gaming employee occupation permit. Under board regulations, a hearing was held on July 10th, 2019. The Office of Enforcement Counsel attended the hearing, putting in evidence of the criminal charges. Mr. Smith, however, did not attend or participate. As a result, the evidence, based on the evidence presented, the hearing officer recommends the suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Tyrone Smith's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you very much. Bureau of Licensing, Sue Hensel.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be licensure related to the change of control of a slot machine licensee, one table game manufacturer renewal application, 3 video gaming terminal operator applicants, 8 video gaming terminal establishment applicants, and 822 principal key gaming and non-gaming employee applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of 1 gaming service provider applicant and 2 gaming service provider qualifier applicants. The first matter for your consideration are licenses associated with the change of control of Valley Forge Convention Center Partners, LP. Under the change of control, Boyd Gaming Corporation is acquiring Valley Forge Casino Resort. On April 4th, 2018, the board preliminarily approved the change of control subject to certain conditions, including the licensure of Boyd Gaming Corporation and its principals. Boyd Gaming Corporation filed applications for all required individuals and entities associated with the transaction. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the applicants, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that, pursuant to the requirements of the change of control approval, the board consider licensure of Boyd Gaming Corporation and its principals.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve for licensure parties relating to the change of control of Category 3 slot machine licensee Valley Forge Convention Center Partners, LP, to Boyd Gaming Corporation as described by the Bureau of Licensing, and finally, approve the change of control and with the conditions requested by the Bureau of Licensing and Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration is the renewal of Total Up Inc.'s manufacturer license. Total Up Inc. is a Canadian company that produces player-activated games, including a sick bow shaker. Total Up has asked the board granted a reduced licensing fee for its table game manufacturer license. The renewal fee for a manufacturer is $150,000 for a 5-year license. Under the Gaming Act, the board may modify the fee for a table game manufacturer if it determines that the fee will unreasonably limit table game devices or associated equipment. Consistent with this provision of the Act, the Bureau of Licensing has adopted a reduced licensing fee policy which has been presented to the board. Total Up has requested a reduced fee of $15,000, which is consistent with the Bureau's policy. The Bureau of Licensing recommends that the board grant the reduced fee.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grants the renewal of Total Up Inc. table game manufacturing license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration are conditional video gaming terminal operator licenses. A VGT operator owns, services, or maintains VGTs for placement and operation at truck stop establishments. The VGT operator applicants are Commonwealth Gaming, LLC, Shaw VGT Services, Inc., and Venture Gaming, LLC. Under the Gaming Act, the board may issue a conditional VGT operator license provided certain criteria are met, including that the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a completed application, has not had a similar license denied or revoked, and has not been convicted of a gaming law violation. A preliminary review of these applicants indicates they meet this criteria. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the conditional VGT operator licenses.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
One question. This is the first of these that we've considered, right?
We have licensed to this point one terminal operator. So
Thank
these are
Okay. Other questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the video gaming terminal operator conditional licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
also for your consideration are conditional VGT establishment licenses for truck stops seeking to place VGTs in their establishments. The applicants are AMR Trading Corporation doing business as Bethel Food Shop, Gettysburg Travel Plaza LLC doing business as Gettysburg Travel Plaza, Keystone Restaurant and Truck Stop Inc. doing business as Keystone Restaurant and Truck Stop, Sandhus Inc. doing business as Danville Mobile, Sandhus Inc. doing business as Lawrenceville Exxon, Sandhus Inc. doing business as Liberty Exxon, United Refining Company of Pennsylvania doing business as Quickfill number 226, and United Refining Company of Pennsylvania doing business as Quickfill number 228. Under the Gaming Act, the board may issue a conditional establishment license provided certain criteria are met, including that the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a completed application, and has not been convicted of a gambling law violation. A preliminary review of these applicants indicate that they meet this criteria. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the VGT establishment licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
And again, is this the first of these?
This is not the first. We have had these before us.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal establishment conditional licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is the approval of principal and key licenses and gaming service provider qualifications. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 4 principal and 3 key employee licenses, as well as 2 gaming service provider qualifications. I ask that the board consider the orders approving these licenses and qualifications.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal and key employee licenses and gaming service provider qualifications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
There are also temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 6 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 570 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 221 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants the gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employees registration described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, there is a recommendation of denial for 3 gaming and 1 non-gaming employee applicants. In each case, the applicants were notified that he or she was being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified time frame. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board deny the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are withdrawal requests for gaming and non-gaming employees. In each case, the license, permit, or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with a list of 1 key, 8 gaming, and 1 non-gaming employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of key gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration is a gaming service provider registration for Empire Unistar Management, Inc. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding this company, and I ask that the board consider registering Empire Unistar Management, Inc. as a gaming service provider.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Empire Unistar Management, Inc.'s application for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Sue. Office of Enforcement Counsel.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 17 matters today for the board's consideration, consisting of 1 consent agreement, 5 revocations, 3 suspensions, and 8 involuntary exclusions. The first matter on the agenda is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Downs Racing LP, doing business as Mohegan Sun Pocono. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel John Crow. Representatives for Mohegan Sun are present, and at this time I would request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record, and that anyone not here as an attorney please stand and be sworn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Christopher Soriano, S-O-R-I-A-N-O, Dwayne Morris, LLP, counsel for Downs Racing.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Anthony Colucci, C-A-R-L-U-C-C-I, General Manager of Mohegan Sun Pocono.
Good afternoon. Morning, Chairman and members of the board. Michael Epps, EPPS, Vice President of Legal and Compliance, Mohegan Sun Pocono.
I guess both of you need to stand and be sworn, I believe. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. John Crow, C-R-O-H-E, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for the board's consideration is this consent agreement reached between Mohegan Sun Pocono and the Office of Enforcement Counsel regarding 2 instances of over-serving alcoholic beverages to patrons. First, on September 11, 2017, a patron was served 12 alcoholic drinks in less than 6 hours while gaming at Spanish 21 tables at Mohegan Sun. After being served an alcoholic drink at 10:08 p.m., the guest was discovered by Mohegan Sun EVS staff being combative and vomiting in the Mohegan Sun restroom. Mohegan Sun security helped the guest into a wheelchair and took her to her hotel room. Next, on October 28, 2017, a patron was served 20 alcoholic drinks over the course of approximately 11 hours while on the gaming floor at Mohegan Sun as he gamed at various slot machines. The patron also received a drink from another patron for a total of 21 alcoholic drinks. At one point, the patron fell to the floor while attempting to sit in a chair at the Breakers Bar and was helped up by other patrons. Subsequently, the patron fell asleep at a slot machine and was awakened by another patron before being served his final drink by Mohegan Sun personnel. The patron was again found asleep at a slot machine at 1:52 a.m. by a slot attendant. Alcohol service was then cut off, and the patron was escorted to his hotel room by Mohegan Sun security. The Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mohegan Sun respectfully request that this board approve the consent agreement and stipulations of settlement, that Mohegan Sun pay a civil penalty of $50,000 as well as a $2,500 administrative fee for costs incurred by the board staff in connection with investigations into this matter.
Questions from Downs, please? Comments?
If I may make some comments, Mr. Chairman, I'll begin, and certainly Mr. Carlucci and Mr. Epps will follow on. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Downs Racing takes very seriously the matters that are set forth in this consent agreement and understands its obligations to comply with all liquor laws and with the principles of responsible service of alcohol. Downs Racing accepts the findings as set forth by the Office of Enforcement Counsel and agrees to the stipulated fine in the amount of $50,000. We recognize that, as with gaming, the ability to offer alcoholic beverages in a casino is a privilege, not a right, and it's one that needs to be exercised in conjunction with all applicable laws and principles. We're not here today to offer excuses or to seek to minimize the conduct that's set forth in the consent agreement, for which we accept full responsibility. Instead, we hope to briefly provide the board with some background and some additional background, and specifically some policy changes and disciplinary actions that have taken place as a result of these incidents, with the hope of avoiding similar incidents in the future. I'll speak globally about a few changes and then address the specific incidents, and I'll keep my presentation brief. Globally, a number of changes have been made with respect to the service of alcohol at the property. First, we've limited the beverage options that are now available on the casino floor. Drinks containing more than 2 types of liquor are no longer offered by servers on the casino floor. So, for example, something like a Long Island iced tea that has a number of different types of liquor was previously offered on the casino floor. Those drinks with more than 2 types of liquor are no longer offered on the casino floor because those drinks have a tendency to result in intoxication more quickly. We've reinforced with the staff the need to be vigilant with respect to situations where a patron could potentially be overserved. We're in the process of conducting Pennsylvania Responsible Alcohol Management Training, known by the Liquor Control Board as RAMP training, for all beverage servers, table games management personnel, valet personnel, and dealers. Essentially, anyone on the casino floor who has patron access will be RAMP trained regarding additional principles of responsible alcohol management. Moreover, the casino is now tracking any patron who's been cut off from alcohol consumption. If a patron, and this is recorded and maintained by security, if a patron is cut off twice in the course of their attendance at the property, so a patron is found to have been required an intervention on a second occasion, they'll be given a warning, and if it happens again, we're going to be banning that patron from the property for a minimum of 30 days, and subject to further review, could be a longer ban of the patron from the property if the patron is coming on the property and over-consuming alcohol. One challenge in alcohol enforcement is when a patron goes to multiple beverage servers and multiple outlets over a period of time, because it can be a little harder in those circumstances to track consumption. Because of that, Mr. Carlucci and his team have taken steps, and these steps that I've mentioned, to increase vigilance and to make sure that everyone is aware of and trained in how to respond to identify a patron who has been overserved and appropriate responses thereto. With respect to the first instance that's in the consent agreement, the September 11, 2017 incident, the 2 beverage servers who were involved in serving the patron were both given record of discussion write-ups as discipline for employing improper procedures regarding free alcohol. In addition, both servers were required to re-review and re-sign the property's alcohol service house policies. We use this instance as a learning experience to review and enhance policy that applies when a patron needs to be assisted to their room. As the Office of Enforcement Counsel mentioned, in this circumstance, security assisted the patron to their room. Mr. Carlucci and his team took a look at that policy to make clearer who on the staff should assist a patron to a room when a patron needs assistance to a room, and also under what circumstances medical assistance should potentially be consulted for a patron who needs assistance to their room, in addition, in an attempt to, again, learn from this experience and enhance procedures overall. With respect to the second instance noted in the consent agreement, the October 28, 2017 patron, we note that a Downs Racing beverage supervisor is the person who ultimately cut the patron off when the patron was found at the slot machine. That beverage supervisor notified security. Security escorted the patron off the gaming floor to his room. At the same time, notification was made to the front desk of the hotel that if the patron were to order alcohol from the patron's room, that request should be rejected.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, certainly, Chairman.
Is there a mini bar in these hotel rooms?
I'm sorry, couldn't hear.
Are there mini bars inside
no,
the
sir.
hotel rooms?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Security also self-reported this incident to the board's on-site compliance representative. The 4 beverage servers who were found to have served the patron while visibly intoxicated were each giving final written notices with respect to violation of the alcohol policy, and each of the 4 were required to re-review and re-sign the property's alcohol service policies. Again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we do not dispute the findings, and this is an unacceptable situation that occurred. We accept the fine and the penalty and hope that these procedures that have been implemented as a learning experience from these 2 instances will result in this incident not happening again. I would defer to Mr. Carlucci or Mr. Epps if they have anything to add, and of course we welcome questions from the board.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. One thing I do want to add that's already been done is that we have our surveillance department is also trained at RAMP, and we did that immediately after this happened because of the issue with people that consume that much alcohol roaming to different areas, so it's imperative that they're watching these people as well. Mr. Chairman, to your question as far as there's many bars in the hotel rooms, there's not. However, unfortunately, we're dealing sometimes with a disease, and many times when you start slowing somebody down, they'll go to their room to consume. Because unfortunately, many times what we noticed, and that's why we have our security checking that, is repeat offenders doing this stuff. They drink to obsess, and they're going to find a way to get it. And our job is obviously to look for it and to protect, the person themselves and them. So with that said, is we put our surveillance department through it because we have multiple outlets, multiple things to look for as far as walking different things, how many drinks they're having. So surveillance is trained in this, and in addition to that, we also are putting all of our valet parkers through alcohol awareness training for that extra precaution because, unfortunately, whether they drink it on property or just come off, okay, the worst thing that we want to do is hand somebody a set of keys and let them drive off. Now, we can't hold them from doing that. We obviously will get them home, discourage them from doing that. However, we can't just say we're not going to give you your keys, but we have a system in place where if somebody's intoxicated, we strongly suggest that they don't. But however, if they do, we're working very closely with Plains Township, and because we have a long drive, we would call them right away, and we let the person know that, and we've had 1 or 2 instances before they actually got off property, Plains Township was there to pull them over. 99% of the times, though, people realize, if I'm going to get pulled over, I won't do that. So we take this very serious. It's unfortunate. I was shocked that we were serving iced teas on the floor. Somewhat embarrassing. Okay, that's been stopped, and some of that is just to increase the amount of awareness that we have on alcohol training. So our goal is, like I said, everybody that works on the casino floor, everybody in valet. We've already had all table games management put through it and surveillance, and we're going to attack this obviously with vigor. So,
let me ask a question.
Please.
I'm sure it's probably in the minds of some of my fellow board members. If you could be a little bit more precise, so somebody is at a slot machine or whatever they're doing, and they get 8 or 10 beers or whatever the heck they're doing, and then recognizing that they might get cut off, they leave the floor and they go over to the bar and they order stuff at the bar. I don't know what's supposed to be done, but how are you tracking that? Or even under your revisions, how can you keep track of what a bartender is serving in a bar someplace else on the property versus what's being given to the patron when they're on the floor?
It's honestly, that's why I had surveillance trained in it, because the people that drink in that excess, they move to different locations, and that's why to me it was imperative to have surveillance trained in that. It also was imperative to start tracking the people that are multiple offenders. With that said, that's where it gets back to serving somebody. Unfortunately, people build up such resistance where there's people that can have, 8 drinks and they look fine. They're still over the limit, right? And there's people that have 1 and they appear. What we follow when we're training is that it doesn't matter whether you had 1 drink or 10 drinks. If you're slurring your words, if you're, seem to be a little wobbly, that we won't serve you. And we're also instructing our tenants to do the same.
What I'm trying to understand is, it's just a very practical kind of question. You have thousands of people wandering around, or hundreds of people wandering around your facility at any point in time, many of whom are being served alcohol. I know you have good surveillance, but you don't have enough people to be watching the movements and the drink consumption of every single person wandering around the floor. So I understand the idea of surveillance paying attention, but something has to tip off the surveillance department if they're going to say, I want to keep track of you. So help me understand that a little bit.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We're tracking the people that are multiple offenders. A first-time person coming in, I don't know how I could do that, in all honesty.
Okay.
We'll do our best, but I really don't know. What I do know is that people that have a tendency to drink to their success seem to be multiple offenders. The one person involved in this was, unfortunately, a widow where people, the employees get to know these people and feel sorry for them, and the person started drinking more and more. Shame on us. Right, again, but you can't be like that. Even though the person's staying in a hotel, the person's being overserved, the person has an issue, and it's our job to take the responsibility.
But like, for example, somebody doesn't have a prior history and gets served 6 or 8 drinks while they're sitting at a slot machine. Is there some sort of system that alerts security, even though the person isn't a prior offender, that, gee, there's a guy that's had 6 or 8 drinks over there in the last hour and a half or whatever, so that somebody would then start tracking them? I'm trying to understand what your capabilities are.
Well, one of the issues is vigilance. That was the term that was mentioned several times. one of the policies that we have in place is that a cocktail server should only serve a patron twice in an hour. That we're trying to monitor that. The problem with it, and you hit the nail on the head, is in almost any situation, if the waitress says, I can't serve you again, you had a couple, that person might move to the complete other side of the floor where the waitress doesn't know that he's had to. And so what we call, lawyer term maybe, is forum shop. So he may walk here, he'll get a couple, he'll go to the other side of the floor, he'll see another waitress, she doesn't know him, he'll have a couple. Then he may go to one of our tenant establishments who's not under the same requirement, or a requirement, we've advised them, but they don't have necessarily maybe the same system, and they certainly haven't seen him, and maybe he has a couple. So over the course of time, this person can consume quite a bit of alcohol, and then you have the added issue of the person returning to their room maybe, and you don't know what happens there. So that the key is we have to continue to be vigilant and make sure that our staff at least is adhering to the rules of certainly no more than 2 within the hour, and we certainly can't serve them a drink while they have one in their hand. So if the guy has a beer and says, hey, give me a shot, I'm sorry, no. But we have to be stern with that and tell our staff that they have to abide by those things, because a lot of times you have a cocktail waitress and they're in a tip job, so you want to be kind to the patrons because it's kind of part of the industry. But we have to hold a firm line on those type of things. And as Mr. Carlucci also indicated, one of the other difficulties with this is the term is visibly intoxicated, and a lot of it is a perception and an image job, and folks are moving fast. So you have to be, as I use the term again, vigilant about monitoring these folks. And sometimes it may be a person who isn't intoxicated, but if they appear that way, we have to be willing to say, I'm sorry, no. So we're reinforcing that with our food and beverage staff, and also our, as he indicated, our table games and our floor personnel, because we just have to try to do the best that we can to keep an eye on this thing, because it is a difficult challenge, because it's not easy to pick up every time.
Yeah, I understand. There may be any other questions up here?
I have a follow-up question, and really something that Mr. Epps said. When they get back to their room, who knows what happens? So I want to go to the protocol that was followed here. And I speak as a longtime former college president that has a certain amount of experience with alcohol and with situations that can occur. If you bring someone back to their room, as you did here in a wheelchair, put them in the room, door is closed, there's at least 3 things that can happen. There can be a fall. They can aspirate, swallow it back down, and choke to death. Or they can aspirate, swallow it back down, it gets into the lungs, can create serious infections, including sepsis, which all leads to death. Those the latter 2 can lead to death. So my question is, how are you providing, I thought I heard from counsel some indication that there was going to be medical follow-up or what have you. Because once you have that patron on the premises, even though they've moved to the residency part of the premises, there's still a foreseeability of a big problem, and there's still, in my judgment, a responsibility for making sure that they're okay. In the college setting, we would have an RA or an RD, resident assistant RD, really sit with the student or be with the student. If the student is in very bad shape, they'd go to the emergency room. We would monitor that. So you really have to take care of this problem from its beginning, the inception, its occurrence, and the end result to ensure the safety of your patron. So I'm interested in the reaction to that.
That speaks to the other policy change that was mentioned in the opening colloquy. Is what we've done is change the policy with respect to escorting people to the room. If there's a situation where we're not comfortable that person should remain in their room, we will refuse to allow them to return to the room alone until they've been cleared by medical personnel. So we've kind of instituted a policy where there has to be some medical assistance and some review, because we need to be certain that that person is in a position to take care of themselves. So when we recognize,
who's making that judgment on premises? That's to be a medical judgment.
It would be security of those personnel that are on site to handle the situation.
And since this incident has happened, when it happened, in the time that's elapsed, have you had, under the new protocol, have you done that?
We've not incurred that situation again since then.
I'm surprised I take your word for it, obviously. I'm surprised it hasn't happened again.
Other questions or comments up here? May I have a motion?
Yes, very nice. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Downs Racing LP as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The next 8 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation of 4 non-gaming employee registrations and 1 gaming employee occupation permit, and the suspension of 2 non-gaming employee registrations and 1 gaming employee occupation permit, which were issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named person. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Good morning, Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a complaint to revoke Richard Diaz's non-gaming employee registration for engaging in unsuitable behavior by not ringing up all sales and taking money that belonged to Sugar House Casino while employed there as a server bartender. Mr. Diaz was terminated from Sugar House. He is not presently employed in Pennsylvania's gaming industry. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke Mr. Diaz's non-gaming employee registration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Richard Diaz's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Once again, Sarah Kolesar, Kolesar, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Milan Upready for stealing over $2,000 in chips while employed as a table games dealer at Presque Isle Downs Casino. As a result, Mr. Upready was terminated from his position with Presque Isle Downs and criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Milan Upready.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Milan Upredi's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming registration issued to Sherry Allen. While on duty as a housekeeper at Presque Isle Downs, Ms. Allen played a patron's credits that were left unattended on a slot machine and attempted to steal the patron's $100 voucher. Ms. Allen was terminated as a result of this incident. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the non-gaming registration issued to Sherry Allen.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Sherry Allen's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Tamara Haken, Haken, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Chad Dale. Mr. Dale was charged with 1 felony and 2 misdemeanor drug-related violations. The charges remain pending. OEC requests that the non-gaming employee registration issued to Chad Dale be suspended.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the suspension of Chad Dale's non-gaming employees registration described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter is a request to suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to Joshua Weeks for playing table games at Sands during a period of time in which he was employed by Sands. Mr. Weeks is not presently employed in the Pennsylvania gaming industry. At this time, OEC requests that the non-gaming registration issued to Joshua Weeks be suspended.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the suspension of Joshua Weeks' non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Once again, David Tepper on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to suspend Michael Gregory's gaming employee occupation permit. Mr. Gregory was charged with aggravated assault, simple assault, and recklessly endangering another person after he was involved in a fight. The charges are currently pending, and at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the gaming employee occupation permit of Michael Gregory.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Michael Gregory's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
John Crow, again for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration held by Derek Dorman. Mr. Dorman pleaded guilty to felony hit and run in South Carolina after striking an individual with his vehicle and failing to stop at the scene of the accident. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration held by Derek Dorman.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Derek Dorman's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, Ferrell, Assistant Enforcement Counsel for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for your consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to James Martinick. Mr. Martinick stole a total of $900 from various cash registers while on a shift as a bartender at Harris Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. The Pennsylvania State Police arrested Mr. Martinick, and his felony-related criminal charges remain pending. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order revoking the non-gaming employee registration issued to James Martinick.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of James Martinick's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and their licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of the inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next two matters on the agenda for the board's consideration are requests to place Sean Ellis and Juanita Davis on the exclusion list. With the board's permission, these two requests for judgments by default will be addressed together since they were involved in the same set of facts. Juanita Davis and Sean Ellis left a 4-year-old child unattended in a vehicle in the Sugar House parking lot as they engaged in gaming activities at the casino. The child was discovered by a Sugar House employee who contacted security and Pennsylvania State Police. Ms. Davis and Mr. Ellis were arrested by Pennsylvania State Police and evicted from Sugar House Casino. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requested the board place Sean Ellis on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I...
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Sean. Yes.
Sorry, I just have one. What's the duration of the time on the list?
5 years, at minimum.
Did you hear that, Sean? 5 years.
I did. Do we have the ability to go higher?
They would have to petition to be removed from the list. So if at the time when they petition, if the board chooses not to remove them, they will remain on the list until the board so desires.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? If not, may I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board approves the addition of Sean Ellis to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel next requests that the board place Juanita Davis on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Juanita Davis to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition for the placement of Marcel Johnson Garfield on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Johnson Garfield cheated while playing Spanish 21 at Harris, Philadelphia by placing wagers and removing wagers after the close of the wagering period. Pennsylvania State Police arrested and charged Mr. Johnson Garfield, and he subsequently pleaded guilty to 1 count of disorderly conduct. Mr. Johnson Garfield was ordered to have no direct or indirect contact with Harris, Philadelphia. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Marcel Johnson Garfield on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Marcel Johnson Garfield to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is the petition for the placement of Mustafa Midget on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Midget cheated while playing roulette at Harris, Philadelphia by placing wagers after the close of the wagering period. He was also in possession of a controlled substance while on the gaming floor and had an outstanding warrant. Pennsylvania State Police arrested Mr. Midget and his criminal charges remain pending. Harris, Philadelphia permanently evicted Mr. Midget from its facility. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Mustafa Midget on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Mustafa Midget to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is the request to place Barbara Bailey Dawson on the exclusion list. After receiving a beverage from a Parks Casino beverage server, Ms. Bailey Dawson placed a plastic bag containing methamphetamine in the beverage server's tip cup. Ms. Bailey Dawson was criminally charged by Pennsylvania State Police, pled guilty, and sentenced to probation in the matter. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Barbara Bailey Dawson on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Barbara A. Bailey Dawson to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ashley Gabriel, Gabrielle, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition for the exclusion of Kendall Rossi. Mr. Rossi and his accomplice, Jesus Basan, who was previously placed on the state exclusion list, were caught committing thefts from vehicles located in the Parks Casino parking lot. Mr. Rossi was arrested and pled guilty to conspiracy to commit theft from a motor vehicle. He has been permanently evicted from Parks. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Kendall Rossi.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Kendall Rossi to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described as the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Gary Banner on the exclusion list. While at Rivers Casino, Mr. Banner punched a female patron in the face, causing injury. Mr. Banner was criminally charged by Pennsylvania State Police for his actions. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board place Gary Banner on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Gary Banner to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final matter on the board's agenda today is a request by the Office of Enforcement Counsel to place Brian Feitnecht on the board's exclusion list. Mr. Feitnecht stole a computer tower from a workstation at Rivers Casino. Mr. Feitnecht was criminally charged by Pennsylvania State Police, convicted, and sentenced to probation. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that Brian Feitnecht be placed on the board's exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Brian Feitnecht to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. Next, we have our public comment period, and I understand that we may have one person registered to speak today, a Mr. Thomas Conley. Is he present? If so, Mr. Conley, the floor is yours.
My name is Thomas Connolly, Connolly. I reside at 345 North Harrisburg Street in Oberlin, Pennsylvania, Swatara Township. I am currently the president of the Board of Commissioners in Swatara Township.
Mr. Chairman, I can't hear him.
Okay, let's see what we can do about that. Hold on a minute. Maybe sit down at the desk for a second. Maybe that'll work.
Start over?
Yes, please.
My name is Thomas Connolly, Connolly.
Can you hear that, Commissioner Logan?
I can, thanks.
Okay.
I reside at 345 North Harrisburg Street in Oberlin, Pennsylvania, Swatara Township. I'm currently the president of the Board of Commissioners in Swatara Township, Dauphin County. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come speak today. I realize you guys are busy, had a long meeting, and I'll be limited to 3 minutes. But there's no shortage of information that I would be able to provide you, including news stories, videos, documentation, and quite an extensive list of the topic which I want to talk about, which is the disbursement of gaming funds in Dauphin County. I'm in a unique situation. I'm in a county with, or a municipality with 25,000 people, roughly 10% of Dauphin County's population. We're a non-contiguous county. We realize that we don't get, the bigger share of the disbursement of the gaming funds. But this year, we saw our percentage cut by 95%. Since the program started, we were in a range of $178,000 to $300,000. The only thing that changed this year, uniquely, is that I am now the president of the Board of Commissioners in a township where every other elected official is in the opposite political party. I feel that there was retribution. I have some evidence of that. We were seeking gaming funds for a police dog, a totally non-political issue. We haven't had canine officers for 12 years. Fortunately, it didn't deter us, and now we have two. But as a result of my approval by the board, I was tipped off that there was going to be retribution and that we were not going to get the dog. It's the lowest amount of money that we ever asked for. It's a highly political issue. The person who disperses the funds, which was disputed by the Dauphin County Board of Commissioners, is Michael G. Musser, a former resident of Swatara Township. In fact, he financed the campaign against me and other people. And one of our current commissioners lives in the home that he has used to run his community network, Better Government PA, lobbying groups. So after being unsuccessful of defeating me in an election and then further being insulted by the fact that the party that he is involved with elected me to be president of the Board of Commissioners, we have to go before this person to get gaming funds. And I understand, there's politics and everything, but there shouldn't be politics in public safety. And I heard some issues today that really shocked me. Knowing that there's a casino in my area, knowing that somebody could potentially have 21 drinks, and there's no hotel there. That person could go on the road, and there's all kinds of issues. And there's things that I heard today that really shocked me. But when I complained at the county level, they told me that this Michael Musser was not on the board, that they were political appointees, the decision makers were, but he oversees the board. And just as a test case scenario, 2 weeks ago, I went before the gaming board pre-application process for my township to seek gaming funds for a park. And I asked, who should we talk to if we have any questions about this? I expected to hear county commissioners, maybe someone on the gaming board. I was given a business card from the attorney from Eckert Seaman. The business card was Michael G. Musser's. They didn't know who I was or why I was there. But I have on videotape that was recorded at a previous meeting where the Dauphin County President, Board of Commissioner, Jeff Hayes said Michael Musser's not involved in this. Yet when I show up months later, I'm given his card and told that I could call him.
Just to clarify this, where did you show up? This
When you apply for a gaming grant, you have a pre-application meeting, and it was actually in a county office, 7th floor of the Memorial Building across from the Dauphin County Courthouse. So you're supposed to be meeting with more or less a neutral party that gets you into the process and talks about your project and gives you dates and timelines.
I see.
So I was given the business card of the person who the county official said has nothing to do with it. And then I was instructed if I had any concerns, I could call that person. Even though it was the Memorial Day weekend, I could call Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, up till Tuesday. And the reason this happens, and I'm sure you've seen this, is that that's the decision maker in this process. And he then gets additional contact with every single person who has ever applied for. Now we're in the process where I think we're approaching $150 to $200 million. He's a consultant to the board. He's paid by the board. My officers arrested his father years ago. This is the first time we asked I don't want to get too deep into it, but it was a sex crime against children. And this is the first time that we've asked for a police grant. There was concerns, sad to say, within my police department of how would this be received. We asked for $85,000, the lowest request we ever asked for, and we got $13,000. And it came back through the grapevine that rather than give us the dog, they would give us dog food. Well, we purchased the dog. I can go through a history of this, including political people who went outside the process, who got grants for totally unrelated things. But if I can't get into this process because I am a Democrat in an area where a Republican was supposed to be in my seat, and I have supporters who are in the other party, something is wrong. And I heard today about enforcement, which I'm glad. I mean, you basically are the fortress around this entire gaming process to protect the citizens of Pennsylvania. And you have an incredible crack in your facade of how money is dispersed. And I know,
if I could stop you there, because it's supposed to be 3 minutes, giving you quite a bit more than that. But just so we're clear, you seem to be very up to speed. You understand that jurisdictionally, we have no control over the disbursement of those local grants. You understand that that's not within our jurisdiction.
I do understand that,
okay.
but I wanted to put this out here today so that you can't say you didn't know, because I'm not letting up. I'm in a position where I have to protect my community,
I think
my
you should.
residents,
I think you should.
The integrity of the process. And I just wanted to put it out here, and we'll see where it goes. But there's no one in this room who can say they didn't hear this and they don't know. And I appreciate your time, and I wasn't keeping track of the 3 minutes. You could have cut me off.
That's okay.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you
Anybody
for
have any other questions for him at this point? Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. That concludes today's meeting. Our next scheduled public meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 3rd at 10 a.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.